Welcome to Pure Intuitive Talk with me, Trish Smith. I'm a multi-dimensional channeler sharing my gift to assist others to connect and work with their whole being, helping bring them into a beautiful way of high-frequency living. Immerse yourself in an hour of nourishment that feeds your spiritual journey and invites you to embrace your empowered soul. You'll feel armed with new understandings for how to shift from pain to love as we explore topics from shamanic sound healing to gut health. Are you ready to take accountability for the impact that we have on the world around us and learn new tools and techniques to feel whole again? Of course you are, and you're in the right place. Pure Intuitive Talk starts now. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the host of Pure Intuitive Talk, Trish Smith. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio. You can find me on Trish Smith Guide at YouTube, Facebook at Trish Smith Guide or Pure Intuitive Guide, and Instagram Pure Intuitive Guide. So if you want to find me in other ways, you can go ahead and find me out there on the World Wide Web in those multiple ways. But thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you listening. Today I'm going to be talking about my experience growing up with ADHD and my experience with being neurodivergent, how it's served me in my life, what the experience was like for me as a child, and then kind of wrapping up at the end of the show today in how it serves me really well in my practice, and just planting some seeds for you as a listener and things to consider when you're looking for a practitioner yourself. So all of that being said, I wanted to go ahead and dive in, starting from the beginning about growing up with ADHD as a child. So I was born into a family, my parents, right? And I was the oldest of four. So we were each a year apart. And growing up, I was considered the hyper one, the wild one. Don't get me wrong, my brother, that's a year younger than I am, he was also really hyper. And we have different diagnoses. But when I was growing up, I was extremely hyper. I really was. I was the kid that was kind of bouncing off the walls. I didn't take direction very well sometimes. I was cooperative. I think that also came from having parents that were very structured. You know, we had a pretty structured upbringing. And so I think that was helpful actually for my ADHD. And my dad was a very patient teacher, taught us how to do a lot of different things. And they did a good job of keeping us busy, which with four kids, each being a year apart, that worked out really well overall. So I think some of the ways that we look at children, right? And you have kids, you've got 15 kids, and then you've got that one out of this 15 that's really hyper and wild. And back then, so I'm 47 years old now, back then in the early 80s, I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, I think, a lot of the time in my classrooms, definitely on the playground. It worked well for me in some ways, right? Like by the time I was in high school, I was running 6-minute miles. But it also landed me while I was going through school, elementary, not too much. My mom got phone calls home often about how I was a social butterfly and I was a daydreamer and those kinds of things. And then by the time I did pretty well academically in elementary school. But when it came to middle school, that's where the ADHD really started to feel like a problem for me. Whereas in elementary school, having one teacher and not having to divide my tasks like amongst 6 different teachers, I did well academically. But come middle school or junior high, they called it back then, 7th grade and 8th grade, I go into 7th grade and I've got 6 different teachers and they all want different things from you. And it's 45 minutes in the classroom, bell rings, are off to the next classroom. And that's when the ADHD started to feel like it was a problem. The having to like please each one of those teachers, right? Because you have all these different subjects and you have to do well in each one of them, but you don't have one teacher teaching you all day. So it was very different and it felt like a lot for me. I found myself really struggling with reading where I hadn't seemed to struggle as much in elementary school. So I think it was a lot of the environment being so overstimulating. Granted, I'm well aware that I was at the age where the hormones start coming in, so I'm sure that played a role. But the difficulty of trying to read and like reading the first sentence a few times until it made sense, reading the second sentence a few times until it made sense, the third, fourth, whatever, fifth of maybe of the paragraph, and then having to go back and read the whole paragraph over again to try to make the whole paragraph make sense. Um, so my grades really kind of slowly declined over that seventh and eighth grade year. It's like elementary school was like A's and B's, and then it's like B's and C's. And then by the time I hit ninth grade, it was like C's and D's. 10th grade, it was like D's and F's. Um, so, so in junior high, I just noticed that the responsibilities of having to have all of those different teachers to report to really started to take a toll on me. And that's when I really noticed like that my brain was different. Um, and I mean, in elementary school, like I think often people kind of looked at me sideways throughout my life growing up. I heard a lot of what's wrong with you. And that doesn't feel good when people, adults, right? And they look at you, what's wrong with you? And so then I started questioning myself, right? What is wrong with me? And I got a lot of, like, you're really weird, people thinking I'm the crazy one. I was hyper. I didn't always necessarily listen to authority. I questioned authority, I think, very naturally from a very young age, which I know my mother genuinely appreciated. But that being said, come high school, right? When now there's, boys involved and school also, right? My grades then, went from the C's and D's coming in freshman year, and then we moved. We had a lot of I had a lot of trauma going on my freshman year. Um, and then again throughout high school and especially my senior year. But regardless of the trauma, being wired differently. I have always thought differently than most people I know. I spent a lot of my years trying to like feel normal and wonder what was wrong with me, especially when people ask you, like, what's wrong with you? And so throughout high school, I think a lot of the drugs that I was doing was a lot of self-medicating, whether or not it was from dealing with traumatic things happening at home, where I'm like, numbing myself from that, or if it was, even just trying to manage the ADHD itself, right? Self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. Um, but high school academically was not good. And at that point in my life, I really wasn't, I decided not to care anymore about school. And I just look back and I think it was really unfortunate. I really do appreciate nowadays that we're witnessing a lot of like accommodations made for students with ADHD and other neurodivergent diagnoses. And so I'm grateful. I love being able to witness the children now. And I worked at an elementary school for 12 years. I worked in special education for several of those 12 years. And seeing the services provided and even like the difference in how we treat children that have a neurodivergent diagnosis. And so that for that, I'm grateful that I'm hoping that a lot of the kids that are neurodivergent don't have those same experiences, but I know that they come from everybody around you. Um, so that was my experience growing up with the ADHD. In high school, they tried medications. I tried them because my mom wanted me to, and I didn't want to, but I went ahead and tried the Ritalin, they tried me on 5 different things. Eventually, the psychologist said to my mother, Trish wants to be who she is so badly that the medications aren't working for her. So I remember at the time thinking, yeah, buddy, now they finally understand. And looking back as an adult, my mom probably went home and cried herself to sleep. But anyways, so yes, I just finally at 47 years old, I'm starting to kind of look back and go, oh my gosh, like I don't actually know what it's like to be a neurotypical. Like I don't know. So I, finished high school and went into being an adult, got married, had a child, got, a divorce and married again, had another child. And I was attacked and kidnapped during that process, and then took on another disorder, that being post-traumatic stress disorder. So we stacked the PTSD on top of the ADHD. So I'm sure in some ways I've managed the PTSD maybe differently than a neurotypical with PTSD might manage it. I've also read that sometimes people with disorders are often will accumulate other disorders, or that they'll have multiple disorders. Um, so that being said, I managed to, in my adult life, really find the value in my ADHD and really like take it on as a gift and manage that, what I like to call like taming the Mustang, and like really learning how to utilize ADHD for the gift that it really is. I've got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to go to break in a minute. But when I come back, I want to go over what it feels like to have those gifts, and sometimes what it feels like to feel so neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. And then also talk about like how much I appreciate my ADHD now, and how much I've recognized in my private practice as a holistic life coach that there is this value when I'm working with clients that are also neurodivergent. Something that I didn't expect when I opened my practice, but something that I'm finding along the way and just having a lot of gratitude for. So I wanted to bring that to you today, and I'll get back into that when we come back from break. You're listening to Pure Intuitive Talk. I'm your host, Trish Smith, and right now we are on Transformation Talk Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome back, everybody. I'm the host, Trish Smith of Pure Intuitive Talk. You're tuned into Transformation Talk Radio. And I was just going over my history with being neurodivergent and brought us up to the present. And I have to tell you a cute little fun story. I don't know how fun it is, but anyways, my husband and I were taking dance classes, and I did not know, but I was super iron deficient. This is pretty soon before I had a seizure because of the iron deficiency. And the supervisor of the dance studio sits me down, we're talking because they're always trying to sell you the next package. I love them. They're great, but it's part of their job. And she looks at me and she says, "Have you ever been diagnosed with anything?" And I kid you not, I looked her at her and I said, "Oh, I've got D's for days." And it was funny because I think she was scared in that moment. She's like, "Oh my." But at the time I'd been diagnosed with functional neurological disorder, and I thought, well, gee whiz, this stack of disorders is just growing. Now I understand that it was actually an iron deficiency, and I have since been able to get medical attention for it and whatnot. So while I was so iron deficient, my ADHD didn't feel so prominent. In the last few months, I've really been able to get my iron stores back up. My ADHD is coming back online. Like, it's just so strong as my energy returns. And I have had to kind of look back, right, at the ADHD and go, oh my goodness, like I know how to handle this, right? I had learned to, in my adult life, used it as a skill, right? So people with ADHD are really good at multitasking really well, right? So if we direct our energy, if it's focused, there's nothing we can't do. And we can do it really well. But it's a matter of managing that wild Mustang that lives inside of our mind, right? When it comes to being neurodivergent with ADHD. And so with my ADHD and my PTSD, I recognize that like they kind of, coincide sometimes, and I have to be able to compartmentalize, like, is this the PTSD? Is this the ADHD? Right? And I'm also a medium. So that comes into play. So there's information all the time. And when I was a child and they called me a daydreamer, I'm sitting there listening to the trees, right? There's information coming in from the trees. There's information coming in from all around me all the time. And so learning to manage all of that has been challenging to say the least. There's been times where my husband has found me crying on the floor in my closet. I wish I was normal. I wish I was normal, right? And so I just want to speak to those of you out there who are neurodivergent, whether your diagnosis is ADHD, whether it's PTSD, whether it's dyslexia, whether it's autism. Um, just know that we hold gifts inside of our neurodivergence, right? And so taking the time to sit with yourself and honor what those gifts are, there are areas that are extra challenging for me because of the ADHD or because of the PTSD, but there's also extraordinary gifts in it. And I just want to remind you as a listener, if you do have a neurodivergent brain, or maybe you have a child as a neurodivergent brain, or a sibling, or a spouse, or a parent, or a friend, to maybe focus on like the value that it brings. So personally, this is so exciting for me to share with you. I opened my practice as a holistic life coach 4 years ago. Okay. And along that time, in the last 4 years, I'm working with different clients and finding along the way that a lot of the clients that have ended up coming and doing in-person work with me have been neurodivergent themselves. And so we've had discussions about what it's been like for myself and for them working with practitioners, whether it's a therapist, a psychiatrist, psychologist, a shamanic practitioner, counselor, life coach that are neurotypical. And we've kind of felt misunderstood has been the consensus amongst, myself and clients that I've worked with. And so I've actually felt this excitement that has come up inside of me when it comes to serving as an intuitive guide, right? So having my mediumship, I tune in and I give readings for people. And then I also am able to tune into their energy bodies and help them find roots of where things are coming from and be able to look at things that they're missing, right? But the truth is that without some of the disorders, without my neurodivergence, that I may not have those gifts and I may not be able to serve the people in the way that I do. And I feel entirely and thoroughly honored to be able to serve the way that I do in my practice. So I also wanted to encourage you, if you're looking for a practitioner to work with and you are neurodivergent, you have a disorder, you're not neurotypical, right? You've walked through the world feeling like an outsider. You've walked through the world feeling like nobody understands. You've walked through the world wondering why you're so different. You've walked through the world feeling overstimulated, overwhelmed, and sometimes like you just don't want to be a part of this world because you don't make sense to anybody. Know that you're not alone. When I've sat in my office with clients, I have been there myself. They've been there. And so it's something I think that neurotypicals also suffer from. I don't think that it's specific to people that are neurodivergent, but it can often really feel if you've been ridiculed as a child, especially like I had myself, it gets stored, right? So we've been programmed as a young child to believe that something's wrong with us, right? I cannot count how many times I had people look at me and say, "What's wrong with you?" Um, and as a kid, it's like, I don't know. I mean, even when I was taking dance lessons just a few years ago, my dance teacher, who I adored, my dance teacher would look at me and say, "Why aren't you doing what I asked you to do?" And I would just look him right in the eye and be like, I don't know. So my brain is wired differently. And I tried doing aerobics, when I was in my early 20s, and they're going left and I'm going right. There's just things that don't quite work for me when I watch them work for everybody else. And it's at times been sad for me, and at times it's been overwhelming, and at times it's hurt. And it's, I grieve over some of that. But being able to focus on the value and being able to focus on the gifts that I have because of my neurodivergent brain, has really led me into the position where I'm working in my practice and I'm able to support others. And that means everything to me. So I just wanted to encourage you that if you have someone in your life that is neurodivergent, or if you yourself is neurodivergent, to reach out and find a practitioner. If you're working with someone that maybe they feel like, oh, they don't understand me, maybe try finding a practitioner that works specifically with people that are neurodivergent. I work with people myself. You can reach out to me, and you can go to my website, pureintuitiveguide.com, and schedule an appointment. I do free consultations. But yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is that we're not wired neurotypical. And sometimes it feels like living in a different world. I'm sure for them, it feels like, we're living in a different world. And there's the commonality, right? We all love each other. We all respect each other. And none of us, not one single person on this planet knows what it's like to live inside of another person's brain, right? That's just the truth of it. But I do find that there's a lot of common denominators when it comes to sitting down with friends and family and clients that are also neurodivergent. My background is early childhood education, special education, working in special education. It was often that a teacher would say to me, wow, like you just really understand the kids. You really get them. They really respond to you. And I remember telling them, like, I was that kid. I was the kid that was sitting in the corner. I was the kid that, my mom was being called because she's not listening. She doesn't understand. I was the kid taking the remedial class because I couldn't follow along with the teacher in the regular class. And my senior year, they finally did an IQ test on me. And I remember them explaining to my mom, like, we don't know what's wrong with her. She's smarter than the average adult. We just don't know what to tell you. Now things have come a long way since then, it's great. Like I said, I'm so happy for the kids growing up these days. There's just so much more information out there. People are educating themselves, and we're learning to work better with people with neurodivergent brains. So that makes my heart happy. So I got a little moved, a little teary-eyed about that. It really makes me happy that we have so many services now available and accommodations for our kids with neurodivergent brains. But I just want to make sure that if you're listening, you're looking for someone to work with, that you maybe keep that in mind. One thing I like to suggest with people, whether they do a free consultation with me, whether they come into my office or we have a Zoom appointment, that if I'm not your person, like keep looking, right? So my suggestion is that try working with someone, give them 4 times. Like if you're looking to work with someone once a week, once a month, whatever that is, try it 4 times. Give them the chance. And then from there, if it doesn't feel right, find someone else to work with. Don't give up on working with someone if you need that extra support. And also don't stick with working with someone that you don't feel understands you. I have personally had a lot of great support working with shamanic practitioners and life coaches that have helped me, supported me, taught me different tools. And I really do appreciate gaining support at times in my life where I feel like I need it, or even just learning new tools. So I want to encourage you to reach out and find support. And also to, I know those of us that are neurodivergent, we have a couple of people in our lives that we know, right? We're like, oh, they're like us. I've spent more time in the last several months reaching out and spending more time with people that do have the same neurodivergent brains that I do, or, similar, right? The ADHD and autism. And I found it to be very comforting. So I don't know, maybe those of you listening have already been doing that in your life, and that's awesome. I'm late to the game, I guess. But in the last several months, I've really decided I want to spend more time with people that understand how my brain works, and their brain works the same way, and it's very comforting. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to you also. Was I thinking? Oh, that was another thing I was thinking. Sometimes in our families and in our lives too, like disorders being genetic, we'll look around in our family, and it's like our family they understand us, we understand them because we have the same disorders. And then you go out into the rest of the world and you have all these neurotypicals and they don't understand. It's because we're 5% of the population. Yeah. Um, and so I encourage you to go hang out with your neurodivergent friend, family member, and talk about it. I don't know. I think it should be a subject that we start bringing up and that we bring to the light and that we release shame around. and that we honor and we have gratitude for. So so that's what I wanted to bring to the table today. Thank you for tuning in. I've got a couple of minutes before the show is over. I wanted to remind you, if you would like to work with me or interested in working with me, you can go to my website. It's pureintuitiveguide.com. And there is a scheduling button. You can schedule a free consultation. You can schedule an appointment. I'd love to work with you. And if I'm somebody that doesn't mesh with you, if you feel like I'm not the right person for you, I hope that you find someone that is, if you're looking to work with somebody. And I just wish you well in your own journey. And I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. And I hope that I have encouraged you to honor the gift and the beauty that is you. Thank you for listening to Pure Intuitive Talk with me, Trish Smith, your Pure Intuitive Guide. Come back and join us for encouragement to take responsibility and to connect to your whole being. Remember that every moment is the right moment to choose peace, acceptance, and forgiveness. We all have the courage to look deep within, get real with ourselves, and make upgrades to our ways of interacting with the world. It's been my privilege to share this hour with you. For more information about me, go to pureintuitiveguide.com. That's pureintuitiveguide.com. Thanks again, and we will see you here next time on Transformation Talk Radio.